success of your superintendent to your community?
I think the success of the superintendent is the success of the district. And that's the idea behind the superintendent evaluation process. It's not two different things where you say, I've got a successful superintendent, because to me, the superintendent's only successful if the district's making good progress. So I think it's tied with the success of the district as a whole.
From a superintendent's perspective?
I think that it really, in the best of all worlds, I think that and I'm speaking from a supervisory union standpoint, that these boards and schools are in a real dilemma. They're in a balancing act because board members are elected by their community, one of maybe, in our case, 6 communities. Mm-hmm. And their job is to make sure that that community school is a fine place for those kids to be, that they're getting a good education, that's being responsible. At the same time, we ask them to say, well, they don't always stay in that school in that community. They go on to another school. In our case, it's Harwood. Mm-hmm. And they need to be well prepared there as well. And so they have to, there's a balancing act, I think, on how do you pay attention to make sure that that school that the kids are in is really doing a fine job in their local community, and what's the work that we have to do for working across schools so that the kids are well prepared to come into the high school. I think for me, it's a balancing act between the role the principal plays as well as the role the superintendent plays. I pay a lot of attention to the cross-school work and efforts and cross-board work and efforts. That's where most of my time is spent. I'm very fortunate I have some great principals who do a wonderful job. Now, we work very closely together. I'm not representing that they just kind of take care of that. We work as a team. But if you look at emphasis, we do it that way. So I think you have to have the focus. Otherwise, people are going to live like towers, smokestacks. And really, I don't think that serves students well. I think that because they are going on to other places, at least in the cases where I've been a superintendent, they're going on to another common school, either in 7th grade in some cases and sometimes in 9th grade. And we have a responsibility to make sure they're well prepared to succeed.
So if that focus were on that movement from one school to another, that would become a big part of the evaluation. This notion of information all the time, so that as I as a superintendent am making a report about, maybe it's the transition of the elementary school to the high school, those kids, that I'm reporting how they're doing all along. So if I collect the math score that the middle school results of the math score as kids enter from different schools, that would be an ongoing piece of reporting. So it's not just at the end of the evaluation cycle, but this is an integral part of my reports of how we're doing as a district. And so my evaluation is an ongoing collection of data. And we might have to be explicit about that as we go along. So remember, this is one of our goals, is the transition of kids into the middle school. So this is how we're doing on this area.
And I think to tie into that, it's also about collecting data and looking for trends. I mean, I don't expect to set a goal and within a 12-month cycle have it to be done, crossed off the list, and move on to the next goal. Because I think that most things, in order to really have a positive impact, take several years. You've got to build it into the budget. You may need professional development activities to get your staff to the place that they need to be. And then even with those things, it still takes time to implement and see a difference for kids. So you're talking about math scores and transitioning kids into 7th grade. You collect that data throughout the year, but then you might look at it over several years before you're really convinced we're on the right track. We're making continual steady progress. So now we're going to maybe leave that goal because it's well grounded and established and really making a difference, and start to look at a different area. Not to let that go altogether, but know that it's really become part of the culture of the district. So we have to make sure that we're looking at trends and not just one number and we're done.
Laura, in the eyes of the evaluation process, would it make sense to perhaps use that as a focused area for a couple of years to evaluate a superintendent then? Or do you think it should be
I think that's part of the discussion, absolutely. I mean, in this evaluation instrument, there's, I don't know, 10 or 12 different areas, student learning being one, community relations being another, human resources being another, policy being another. And you want to really focus in what's 2 or 3 of these areas that we really want to focus on as a district. And one of those areas may be a focus for several multiple years. Some of them may be more short term. And it's that having a dialogue with the board and superintendent. What's reasonable? What can we really accomplish? What are our priorities? How do we build our budget around that priority so we give the superintendent resources?